Welcome to another Scroll Sessions episode. We're going to dive in today with Joe Staples. He's a seasoned B2B marketing executive with over 2 decades of experience in senior roles. And Joe has been instrumental in transforming marketing strategies in the SaaS, marketing tech, employee engagement, and customer experience sectors. He's known for his deep understanding of building powerful and differentiated brands, fueling the growth of revenue engines too. From leading successful corporate name changes to authoring insightful articles featured in top publications, Joe has truly made his mark, especially here in Utah. Today, I'm super excited to just unpack all this, talk about marketing, talk about the future, talk about experimentation and all these things. So thanks, Joe, for being on today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, good. Well, maybe start by sharing a little bit of your background and kind of where and how you got into marketing.
So I didn't start there. I started in the client success space, cut my teeth at Novell in the early days and kind of the heyday of that company and all that it did for Utah.
Yeah.
And then it was at Novell that I pivoted away from client success into product marketing. And for anybody that's thinking of a marketing career, I think product marketing is the best entrance into it.
Yeah.
You just get some deep understanding of what it takes to get a product to succeed. And then I was fortunate enough, I've been a CMO for 20 years in Seattle, in Indianapolis, and for a couple of companies here in Utah.
An amazing track record. Tell me maybe some early days at Novell. I've heard a lot of stories and heard other people talk about it, but Novell was really like I think Utah's like first really true like tech company at the time, right?
True tech company that was succeeding like crazy.
Yeah.
So I started working for a company called YCAT Systems. We did computer-based training and education, but Novell was a rocket ship.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember we were a public company, and if the stock didn't go up $1 a day, you were kind of disappointed. It seemed like couldn't really do anything wrong because the revenue success kind of masked everything. I'm sure we did a ton of things wrong.
Yeah.
Nobody left in those days just because it was so fun. It was first or second jobs for a lot of people. So it was a real young crowd, except for Ray Norda was late 60s, 70 years old running the company.
Yeah.
But it was awesome. It was great.
Yeah, I'm sure the energy was like palpable. It's like what you see in the movies, I think, is kind of what I've heard.
It was great.
So, that's awesome. And why make the shift into product marketing from customer success? Do you feel like that was a natural thing, or do you feel like this is kind of where I want to take my career at that point?
It was a desire for me. So the creativity and branding side of marketing was the thing that really excited me. And branding oftentimes gets thought of as corporate branding, but you have to brand the product as well.
Yeah.
And so how do you position that product to where it's differentiated in the market? How do you get buyers to pay attention to it, analysts, press, everybody to pay attention? And that kind of a challenge was really exciting. And so it was kind of a hard pivot for me. I had no marketing experience, but they kind of took a chance on me. And then fortunately for me, I was given a couple of products and one of them really expanded and did really, really well, which opened the door to the
other
rest of my
opportunities.
career. Yeah.
And what about marketing really excited you at the time? Because marketing then is also very different than it was even 10 years later from then. And,
so different.
And totally different than it is today.
So different. Yeah, digital marketing didn't exist.
It wasn't a thing. It was print.
Right. we did a lot of trade shows.
Yeah, trade shows and print.
But I think overall it was understanding the impact that you could have on the business. So you think of a salesperson, it's pretty much one-to-one, and they can sell so many deals in a year and they hit their quota and they're happy. But marketing is this one-to-many proposition. So the things you do as a marketer can impact the business in a really, really broad way. So that was exciting for me. And then the creativity piece, just trying to come up with clever ideas and ways to cut through the clutter and get people's attention. That was fun. That was fun as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I talked to several guests that have had extensive careers before even digital marketing was a thing too. And it's fun to hear stories of like dealing with print. And that's kind of making a little bit of a comeback this past couple of years with digital marketing becoming increasingly expensive and
crowded.
And crowded. And crowded. So it's been kind of interesting. And how do you feel like experimentation has changed since the days of Novell to now?
I'm not sure the core concept of experimentation, I think, is still the same, which is go try new stuff. And I think as you look at a lot of different companies, they struggle with that because there's risks associated with it.
Yep.
So you have to create this culture that says,
Take the risk.
Yeah, 8 out of 10 might not even work, but you're never going to find the 2 that are great if you don't do the other 8.
Yeah.
So kind of creating this culture that says, let's experiment, come up with new ideas, let's pressure test them, let's do them as inexpensively and as quick from a time frame standpoint as we can, but try things over and over again. And I think that's how marketing teams succeed. The ones that just take the textbook answers that say, spend this % of your money on Google paid search and this much on SEO, you kind of fit in and you may do okay, but you're never going to kind of break free of the gravitational pull that's on everybody.
Yeah, no, and especially and this as a CMO, I feel like also the tenures of CMOs have gotten increasingly shorter the last 10 years. I think I remember reading something like it's 18 months now.
Yeah. When I was in the heart of my CMO career, it was 23 months. So it was less than 2 years, which is pretty short. And I've thought about it a lot. What's the reason? Why do they turn over so much? Yeah. And I think there's 2 things. The good ones turn over because once you're good, you get a lot of people that are pulling you, trying to take you away. And the bad ones, they get discovered that they're bad, that they're not your results. You spent a lot of money and you didn't really deliver a whole lot. So we're going to move you on.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you nailed it. I think it's ones tend to swing for the fences and hopefully their ideas stick and hopefully it wins and they win big. But it's also kind of crazy too because it's sometimes you could be a really great marketer and your idea just doesn't stick at that same time, but it could have worked, a year ago or maybe in another year. I mean, if not only year time spends, but we're talking days and weeks now for things trying to execute and them not hitting or not working with how fast these platforms grow and change. TikTok wasn't even a thing not even 3 years ago, right? And now it's going to be banned. Or not really banned, but they're trying to work that
restricted,
out. Restructure or whatever it is. But so things just change so fast now. How do you advise people to navigate these changes?
So again, I think it goes back to experimentation. When something comes up and it looks like, hey, there might be some promise here, give it a try. Give it a little try. Give it a short time frame to see how it plays out. But I think if you ignore them, you can end up getting left behind.
Yeah.
I do remember when social media really started to land and take over, I can remember looking at Twitter and thinking, really?
This is going to be interesting.
Is this really going to be a marketing channel for me? Do people really use this to make buying decisions that are $200,000 worth of software?
Yeah.
But you couldn't ignore it. So you had to test it, you had to try it. And then once it seems to pay off, then you double down on it and triple down on it and kind of grow from there.
And guess what? People do make big buying decisions off of social, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And they do. And I think it comes to, I had Levi Lindsay on the podcast and Levi's a pretty good friend of Shane and I's. And he was the Scroll CMO for a day. That's another story. But Levi and I got talking about consumer behavior itself. It changes based on obviously platforms that come out and all that stuff. But the psychology behind it doesn't change. Human behavior at its core doesn't necessarily change. It's just where the eyeballs are going. Right. And
so true. Yeah. If you think of the core fundamental principles of I have a need and can you fill that need or can you show me a better way of doing whatever I'm trying to do, then my wallet opens up and I spend money.
Yeah. Yep.
So then, the tactics behind that of how do I even get you to pay attention to me? How do I get you to know about me? How do I get you to trust me? How do I get you to make an emotional buying decision based on kind of the emotion that you feel from me? I think Apple's such a great example. So again, dating myself back into the 90s, Apple had a 3 or 4% market share of desktop computers. And it was, Microsoft thought that these guys are, we'd never have to worry about them. Yeah. And they created such an emotional tie to that brand. That is why they took off. The computing platform had some things, but you could still argue that Windows-based operating system and the other things that Microsoft offered were better. But the emotional tie to that was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's what's made them into one of the world's largest companies, most valuable companies. The story of Apple is crazy. And I think it is a really good, case study in how important it is to create that emotional connection and how important, brand is to growth overall. And granted, Apple wasn't a thing then and the brand wasn't necessarily big, but they were able to create that emotional connection to the brand, to the product, to the hardware, and that then translated to business growth. That's what they're known for now.
Yeah. So,
same with Nike and all the other big brands.
do you remember the ad campaign that Apple ran where I'm a PC, I'm a Mac?
Yep.
And you had the two guys, and the PC guy looked like Bill Gates.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
the cool guy was the Mac guy. That was totally emotional.
Yeah.
I mean, this wasn't a product pitch. This was, I want to be like that guy, not like that guy.
Yeah.
And it was huge. They probably ran it for 3 or 4 years. I think there were 80 different versions of it. It was really well done.
They did that campaign. There's another one where it was an old television, I think, commercial where it was kind of like this play on like everybody at Microsoft was like almost communist, and the Apple guy came in and like threw a big hammer at the screen and like, we're disrupting this kind of thing. And that was huge. I just remember that popping into my head. But you had similar campaigns for Nike, right? When they came out with Just Do It. And it was all about kind of like the average person, that it wasn't about celebrity endorsements.
Yeah. It was the athlete in all of us.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And telling those stories.
One really interesting thing is most of the time branding people use examples that are consumer branding.
They're easy.
And there are more of them, right?
Yeah.
B2B branding is a lost art.
Yeah.
It really is. It's hard to find a B2B, certainly SaaS company that has done branding well.
Yeah. When I feel like, especially the last several years, it's very much become about telling the founder story. And I think building the brand around the founder, I think that's been a huge standout for a lot of B2B SaaS. I know just like personally, even the last like 10 years, I followed the story of Weave founders, right? And that's why I got into that brand and was like, this is cool. I like what they're doing. I like the culture. And it wasn't necessarily because of the product. Their product wasn't even for me, but it was all about the founder story, right? And also the kind of experience they were creating, the culture they were creating at the business at the time. And obviously that's changed and evolved, and Weave's very different now than it was even a couple of years ago. So how do you advise people in B2B SaaS in the brand aspect and how to create this experience that buyers and other businesses want to interact with?
I think one of the first things is they need to have the skills to develop brand. There's a lot of people that don't. It's just foreign to them. They know how to run digital marketing campaigns, but when it comes to creating this story and this emotional feel around it, I mean, it's hard. And so using outside agencies, if you don't have those skills, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a sin. It's not something that you should be ashamed of. There are good outside agencies that are really, really skilled at that. When we, for a local Utah story, so we rebranded At Task to Workfront in 2015. And that was an exercise of how do we create some emotion around this brand. We had good reasons to make the name change. At Task was looked at as kind of a task management system. People thought that you don't pay very much money for a task management system. And we were out asking people for $250,000 checks.
For sure.
So we rebranded to Workfront. We used an agency. We went to an agency out of Seattle called Blackwing Creative. And it was kind of a fascinating story. So if you remember the Workfront branding, it was all around the lion.
The lion. And I think you recently shared, didn't you share this on LinkedIn about the upside down?
The upside down lion, That was kind of an interesting one. But when they came to us, so we had selected the name, we bought the URL, and we were in the process of coming up with a logo. Most logos, unless you're a well-known company, the logo is irrelevant. Like people can't even remember what it was. Yeah. So they came and they probably gave us a half a dozen options. And one of them was this lion. And I had a creative director at the time named Dave Lisway. And he said, I think this lion has some legs. We could build, around the fierceness of doing work, being the king of work and all these things. And I was like, Dave, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
What's a lion have to do with enterprise software? And he wouldn't let it go. He just kept at me. Finally, he convinced me.
The founder's CEO bias is crazy. I will say, after working with so many, it's crazy. Anyways, keep going.
So he convinced me, and then Eric Morgan was the CEO at the time, and I can still remember it was about 7:30 at night, and Dave and I mustered up the courage to go try and talk Eric into doing this thing with the lion. And Eric was a very trusting CEO, to his credit. A lot of times you'll get CEOs that they get in the way.
Yeah.
Eric was very much, this is your stuff. If I see you going off the rails, I'll pull you back in, but otherwise go do your thing. And so he went. He said, okay, I'm in. And we built this campaign around it. And I think it had a huge impact on the growth of that business. So the times that I was there, we grew from about 60 million to about 165 million in ARR. And people would tell me all the time, they'd say, oh yeah, you guys are the line.
You're the line.
That's
yeah,
right.
and it's what I think of when I think of Workfront.
Yeah.
And I've never used the software once. I never interacted with it, but I did have a couple of friends that worked for the company. But
And
I
if you
remember
think-
the lion.
If you think of the space that we were in, it was a crowded space.
Yes.
To think that you could differentiate on a feature by feature basis, for every 2 features that you had that somebody else didn't have, they had 2 other features that you didn't have.
Yeah.
And so you needed to create this. And some of the images that we used, we would go to trade shows and we would just have these enormous lion images, and it drew people into the booth, then let us talk to them. So, nobody's ever going to buy based on some of those things, but they're going to take enough interest that you get into a sales conversation.
Yeah. And that's the point of branding and marketing anyways.
Right.
Right? It's the attention. And speaking of an extreme example of that, we've got Liquid Death. And Liquid Death was born out of advertising executives being handcuffed and wanting to do something different. And they found something in a space that are like, we can come in and we can do something different because it's our own, right? And then they just went buck wild with the branding, with the meaning behind everything, and took it to an extreme. And guess what? They're $1 billion company now.
Yeah. And none of those things happen if you don't take bold steps.
Yeah.
If you kind of tiptoe into things, you just turn out to be an also-ran. So this is really about making some bets. Sometimes they don't work. Yeah. This goes back to experimentation. Sometimes you just go, wow, that thought of that idea. That was a bad idea. But if you're not bold, you're guaranteed that you're not going to accomplish anything.
Yeah, no doubt about it. How now, kind of fast forwarding in your career to being board advisor, also adjunct board advisor at several companies, how do you advise on these boards for marketing, for experimentation? Do you want maybe a recent example of some advice that you gave to a founder or a CEO?
So even before the step of experimentation, a lot of the work that I do is around getting the messaging and positioning right. So almost every founder will tell you, no, we know.
We know who our market is.
Exactly. But if you go talk to 5 different people on the leadership team, they all give you different answers and certainly different ways of saying it. So it's all in their head. So I view my job as, I'm going to tease this out of your head and I'm going to get all of you to agree on something that's going to work. The challenge with that is most of the time what they're willing to agree on is boring.
Yes.
Because nobody objects to it. Yeah, I can live with this.
Yeah.
And we're like,
come on, guys.
We're not doing
Come
that.
on.
Yeah. So it's really taking that, getting the messaging and positioning right, and making sure that it's differentiated. So you can't do messaging and positioning in a vacuum. You have to say, how's it relate to the other people that we compete with?
Yeah.
I'll give you one example. I went to work as the CMO for a company called Interactive Intelligence. We sold call center software.
It's pretty boring.
Talk about boring.
Yeah.
And then I did project management software. That's even
also
more boring.
Also boring.
But the president brought me in and said, have you seen Avaya's material? And I said, yes. And he took some out and he slid it across the desk and he said, that's what I want to look like. And I can remember looking at him and going, we're not doing that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And he said, you don't like it? And I said, I like it, but we'll never look more like Avaya than Avaya looks like Avaya. We have to pick something else. If somebody already owns the lane, you got to pick a different lane.
Yeah.
And so it took a lot of convincing of him, but got him to recognize that, and we went down a different path.
No, that's amazing. And I think messaging is the foundation outside of like choosing a core market and obviously solving a problem. Right? But messaging is the foundation of everything. It's going to impact the entire organization. It's going to impact marketing, sales. It's going to impact internal culture, external, like you name it. But it's the messaging has got to be the foundation of everything.
I'll give you another example. So the Workfront messaging, again, project management software is as boring as it gets. And we leaned in to how boring it was. Like we would talk to the market and to prospects about how boring it was. We created a fictitious guy that was super, super boring who promoted the use of email and spreadsheets to manage your projects. And we ran a number of different campaigns around that character. Again, letting
Hitting your
us
core target market.
look very, very different than what the status quo was or the standard already was.
Yeah. Well, one of the main reasons that Scroll chose Monday.com as our project management software is because of its branding and how the ease of use of it, right? But it came from a lot of research, and now we're calling it colloquially the Scroll Bible is our Monday.com.
It's not in there, it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It our business would not. It would cease to function without our project management software. So it's huge. It's funny because it's it's super boring, but it's also very critical at the same time to actually how your business or any business operates.
Which is the interesting thing for B2B technology.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to do with running shoes and apparel than it is with software.
Yeah.
Still doable.
Yeah, no, it's still totally doable. And I had, Aaron McReynolds, the founder of Alicia. So he was just on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and they're making their software, in his words, sexy, right? They're making it look and feel really good because any of the other sales engagement tools out there don't look like that. And they're horrible looking and very hard to use and all this kind of stuff. And people are sick of using Salesforce, I guess is probably an easier, simpler way to say it. And they want to use something that is fun to use and is inviting and looks good. And I think they're doing a really killer job.
Yeah, agree.
But tell me a little bit about your adjunct work too, and maybe give a background on me too. I also attended LDSBC, and I think my entire career and trajectory at the time to professors that gave their time to me outside of their day job and outside of the work that they were doing and showed me real life examples. I wouldn't be where I am today without adjunct professors that gave their time at BYU Salt Lake and on LDSBC too. So I want to know, what is it like to be an adjunct professor, and do you enjoy giving back, and maybe share a couple stories?
It is the best.
Yeah.
They don't pay you any.
Yeah, you don't do it for the pay.
I think like gas money. I think I get gas money going
I'm sure.
down to UVU. But I will tell you, as some people look at their career and they go, okay, I can't wait until I get to the point where I can do nothing. I can golf and goof around. And that just wasn't me. I like marketing and I like technology. So I had zero desire to quit doing any of this stuff. And so for a long time, probably for 15 years, I thought, I'm going to transition. When I come out of a daily operator executive role, I want to go to a university and I want to teach. And it is super rewarding. If anybody thinks, maybe I want to do that, they should do it. It is really, really rewarding. And I thought, would I have liked being a professor as a career? And I don't think so, because then I would think, well, I want to be the dean. I want to be the president of the university. And now I go there, I worry about 31 students and trying to help them learn great things. People will ask me, they'll say, oh, you teach at UVU. Do you know? And I'll say, don't even ask me, because I don't know anybody.
I just know my students.
I know 31 students is all. The biggest thing that I have tried to do, and I'm assuming in listening to your experience and having adjunct professors, is I want to bring them real world experience into the classroom. So I'm going to forget some of them and they'll be mad when they listen to this, but Tomas Rado I had on, Nate Randall I had on, Logan Mallory I had come, Parker Giles, Heather Hurst, Carolyn Jardine.
Amazing people,
Yeah, so I brought them in, and these are people who are still day-to-day fighting it out in marketing trenches.
Yeah.
And they share their stories. We do expert panels. I'll have them present, because otherwise I think I'll give you the book, read the book, I'll give you the test, and we could be done.
Yeah.
So I really try and give them this, here's what it's like in the real world. UVU also has a marketing simulation that's pretty cool that we run during the semester. So they have, in this simulation, it's for a women's handbag company.
Okay.
They have to select the product, they have to price it, they have to figure out how they're going to distribute it, how they're going to promote it. And the simulation, once they make their choices, it runs it through the simulation and says, you just lost a whole bunch of money, or, gives them the results and gives some feedback. So that's been cool. The one other thing that I love is they have to create a marketing plan as a group for a product. They come up with the product and their group works on it and comes up with this pretty extensive marketing plan. And I think going out and trying to get a job after you come out of high school and sliding that across the desk
Yeah.
would be good. And the lessons they learn around collaborating with other people, I think are super valuable as well.
Yeah,
'Cause
totally.
as you know, you don't go work for a company in a vacuum and
Yeah, no.
work all by yourself.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's super valuable. And even taking that a step further, I had an adjunct professor who I ended up being business partners with for several years,
Wow.
doing influencer marketing, and we got along so well. And I absolutely loved working with him. And he went back to get his PhD, and then I met Shane. So that's how that worked out. But I owe a lot to my adjunct professors for kind of igniting that spark. And also, I think I owe it to myself for wanting to do and go and take school a different route and do all the SBC and BYU Salt Lake. You know, at the time I was working my tail off, and it was the only thing that could work with my schedule. And
Good for you.
but I appreciate my adjunct professors and what they did for me, and also what they did for their students. So
Yeah, good for
I
you.
have no doubt.
The one thing I tell, so I get the class that I teach is marketing principles. They're usually sophomores and juniors, and they're not all marketing majors.
Yeah.
And I'll tell them on the first day of class, if you're an accounting major or a finance major, I'm here to convert you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've gotten some. I haven't
Yeah,
got as
yeah.
many as I want, but I think marketing
I
is
love
just
it.
such a
It's so much fun,
Yeah.
and a lot of variety. I think more so than most other, I think, business sectors, business even majors in college. It's a way more fun
Yeah,
to
agree.
learn about and talk about. Is there any advice that you would give to young professionals really trying to maybe get started in their marketing career, maybe take a step up from where they're currently at, and maybe an entry-level marketing job? What advice would you give to them?
So the biggest thing that I tell my students is go become an expert in one thing. Pick whatever it is. If somebody decided that they needed to hire an SEO manager, an influence marketing manager, or a paid search manager, be that person that they go, well, you wouldn't want anybody else than him or her. Like, be the very best at something that's somewhat narrow. It'll give you job security. You can always fall back on that. And then once you have that expertise, then branch out. So sometimes students will say, I'm so excited. I just got hired as the marketing manager for, some tiny little company. And they're going to do a whole bunch of different things. And I say, who do you work for? And they go, I work for the CEO. I'm like, who are you going to learn marketing from? And they go, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Versus you go in and you've got a narrow thing that you are just going to become a rock star at, and then you get to expand beyond that.
Yeah.
The other thing I tell them is learn how to write and learn how to present. AI might mess up
Huge.
my learn how to write thing. But
Writing and messaging, I think, even with AI screwing up with some stuff, it's going to be the only thing that helps you stand out at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, because I think most people are poor writers.
Yeah.
And so that can be a big advantage for you. And most people are poor presenters. They think they're good presenters. The people that are bad writers, they know they're bad writers. The people that are bad presenters, they still
Don't
think
know.
they're good presenters.
Yeah.
But if you can stand up and know how to tell a story and be a great presenter, that'll boost your career as well.
Oh, it's huge. And I mean, I recently attended the marketing summit, and I was surprised there were some really great speakers. There was also some not so great speakers too, and I was surprised. I'm like, man, some of these people are like pretty far along in their career or at the tail end. You could have maybe done a better presentation.
Yeah.
And it kind of blew me away. And that's coming from the son of someone who is a professional speaker. So I've had a lot of years of watching my father speak, and he's very, very good at it. He's an expert in professional and medical ethics. And he speaks a lot across all the country and the world.
Nice.
But anyways, it always floors me at some presentations that I see. And it's a huge skill, and it's such a valuable skill.
Such a valuable skill. And the good ones, I mean,
They
you
stick
just
with
like
you.
You're hanging on their every
Yeah.
word. So I ran our user conferences for 15 years, and we would bring in these big keynoters.
Yeah.
And you could tell they just had this stuff down.
Yeah,
The one that I remember the most was Jim Lovell, the commander of Apollo 13.
Yeah.
And I asked him before we went on, I said, how many times have you given this speech? And he goes, I just counted it not that long ago. He says, I think I've given it a little over 2,000 times.
Oh
And
my gosh.
and there's nothing better than preparation to
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
deliver a good speech.
Yeah.
But he just knew every place to pause and every word.
It's an art.
It was great. Yeah.
It's definitely an art, and I don't doubt that was an amazing thing to listen to. I always liked astronauts and space, and
It was the
since I was
best
a little
one that
kid.
we ever had. We had Clayton Christensen. I mean, we had
You had
all
some
kinds
amazing
of
speakers, I'm
good
sure.
ones, but Jim Lovell was, he got a standing ovation. Oh, and we had Gene Kranz with him, who was
Oh,
the
wow.
commander of
Is that
Houston Mission Control.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was Apollo 11, but you're right. That's crazy. Where do you think the intersection between like marketing and technology is headed next? I know we've talked a little bit about that today, but I think, and especially with B2B SaaS, like where do you think it's going?
So clearly AI is going to continue to impact for the next 20 years or longer. Immediately out of the gate, AI is going to have a huge impact on content. You can just create content so much quicker and faster. I think the biggest thing is around buyer readiness. I think technology is getting better and better at helping marketers identify when a buyer is ready for you to engage with. They're looking for different signals, different actions that they take, and percolating those to the top. Because before technology came into play, we just knocked on everybody's door. We told everybody the story, and if somebody said yes, then we'd tell them the second page of the story. But the key is really to find those people that are in an active buying cycle. And I think that's going to be the biggest play that technology has. And add on to that is the personalization piece that's getting better and better.
Yeah.
The other day I got an email. I drive a Jeep Wrangler, and it said, we had a picture of the Jeep Wrangler that looked like mine and said, we could save you $300 a year on your auto insurance for your Jeep Wrangler.
Yeah.
And I thought, contrast that with another email that I get that just says, we could save you $300 on your auto insurance.
Yeah. It's very
I'm
different.
responding to this one because
100%.
it speaks to me.
Did you post about that on LinkedIn too?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I feel it sounds familiar to me. I'm like, I think I remember a screenshot or something, but I agree too. I think it's been interesting following, I don't know if you know retention.com. So they're in the e-commerce space and they do messaging and kind of help get e-com owners direct access to their audience through their own / first party attribution and stuff like that. Anyways, they came up with a B2B product that finds IP addresses of LinkedIn users that are visiting your website and then pings you with the user. And it's been really, really interesting. And I think it's another fascinating case study on marketing too. You'll have to go do a deep dive after this on the owner, Adam Robinson, and the way he's gone about marketing his company through this kind of founder-led marketing that he's doing. It's fascinating, and it's another story for another day. Our B2B though is what the B2B product's called, retention B2B. But like even with us, we've noticed that when we're obviously doing a lot of performance marketing for Scroll and also for other agencies, but when we do that performance marketing, you're always missing someone somewhere. It's never 100% perfect, but sometimes that person will visit the website and it'll never be attributed correctly. But now we can get their IP and we can actually just go connect with them immediately on LinkedIn, send them a message, and it becomes kind of like a serendipitous way of going about it. And it's been really cool to see, and they've kind of had a viral impact the last couple of months. So I'm excited to see what happens there. There's a lot of cool softwares that are coming out with AI, and it's going to be an interesting next, decade. True. I think, to say the least. I think with such a demanding career, I think that you've had with balancing adjunct with dealing with students to dealing with boards to former CMO work. Did you ever feel like there was a time where you felt more balanced, or do you feel like balance just isn't a thing and I just need to dedicate time to whatever is in front of me at the time?
I think balance is super important, and I think it's something that I paid attention to my whole life, but not balance from the standpoint of they're going to be equal. Right? It's making sure that you're focused on the right things. And I think that's all about prioritization. When I was young and we still had kids at home, I remember I would go to these training classes and they would say, okay, we're going to go around, tell your name, your title, and what you do for fun. And I would think, I don't do anything for fun. I mean, I did family, church, and work. And those were my three things for a long, long time. Yeah. Once your kids grow up and you get a little bit more time, you can do some other things. But it used to bug me because people would say, oh, and I water ski all the time, or I snow ski all the time, or I rock climb, and I'm an expert. And I used to think, I got nothing.
I love marketing. You're like, I'm obsessed.
But I thought those were the priorities for me. I thought at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure my kids had a dad that was involved with them. I wanted to serve in the church, and I wanted a successful career. So if I focused on those three things, and if any of those other things fell off, it wasn't that big a deal if my golf score was still terrible.
Well, that's okay. I think most people, I mean, mine is. So,
So I think that's important. I did write a LinkedIn article, the one that I got more coverage on than anything I've ever written, and it had to do with heavy travel schedule. So I had a point in my life where I traveled 175,000 miles a year.
oh,
A
wow.
lot of
That
miles.
sounds like my dad. Yeah.
And in this article, I talk about that I was a master scheduler. Like I never missed my kids' games or graduations or birthdays or anything like that.
Yeah.
Give me a few days' notice and I could make sure that I was at home because I was at a level in the organization that I could kind of decide what I was doing. But after I quit traveling, I realized that there's a lot to be said for just being home and answering the math question that your kid can't figure
Yes.
out, or having the conversation around the dinner table and those kinds of things. I don't have a huge regret about it, but it was an aha moment for me, and something that, I concluded in the article that said, if you've got an opportunity to weigh things out, don't get enamored with business travel, because some people do. They think this is really cool. I get to see the
awesome.
world
Yeah,
and
yeah.
somebody else pays for it. Don't get enamored with that. Recognize what you're giving up if you're going to go do that.
Yeah, and I don't think my dad regrets it either. My dad traveled when I was in elementary through probably high school. He was gone 4 days out of the week, but when he was home 100%.
Yeah.
And he was the same way. Always made.
And I'm sure you had a good mom.
Oh yeah, an amazing mother. And my dad always made sure he was at our band practices, our performances, soccer games. You name it, he was there. But the travel definitely, it's a good topic, especially I think for younger people that do want to travel and have young families. Seen it impact like my brothers-in-laws. I've seen it impact family and friends, and it can have a huge impact, and you do
Negative
give up
impact.
a lot, and a negative impact at that. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
if you don't prioritize.
Right. And you just have to pay attention to it and not let it get out of hand. And agree.
And now that you're on several boards, right?
I'm not.
Or
I
just one?
advise a number of companies,
Okay.
but actually I was on a couple boards the companies sold.
Yeah.
And then I just picked up a board seat for a company called Screen Dragon, which is an Irish-based company.
Yeah. You're telling me about your trips
Yeah.
to Ireland, and I'm not as familiar with what a board actually does at the end of the day. I obviously know that they'll advise the CEO, have some kind of equity in the business, but in terms of, I've never been on a board myself. I've never had that experience. Tell me a little bit about that and how that works to evolve and take the business to the next level.
I think board level is very strategic work. And I think to be a good board member, and I learned from some really, really good board members when I wasn't the board member, I was the executive,
Yeah.
that you need to know what lane is yours. So if there are things that are management decisions, you may think it's a terrible decision. Oh, well, you don't get to decide. Just kind of stay out of their way. Because if you're constantly looking over their shoulder and telling them that you think they should use a different color on the trade show booth, that's just not the board's role.
Yeah.
But helping them find and hire good, talented people, helping them make good strategic decisions, oversight to financially, are they running the business the right way? Are they spending too much in one area, not enough in another area? So for Screen Dragon, an interesting one is we just hired, she hasn't even started yet, but she's accepted the offer, a brand new head of marketing. And so to have a couple of months to work with her and share some insights and kind of get her aligned and pointed in the right direction is fun. I will tell you that this will sound terrible. Probably the most fun thing about being on a board is when you're an executive, like you're thinking about the problem 24 hours a day.
Yep.
When you're a board member, you think about the problem, you work on it, and then it's
move
their
on.
problem to figure out, and you go home.
Yep. Yeah, no, I assume as much.
Yeah.
That's the best part about the role. And I think the nature of them usually is good. I think they can be bad, but I think they also can be amazing opportunities if it's the right board, if it's the right people, if it's the right situation.
Yeah,
right?
at Interactive Intelligence, we had one of my primary mentors was one of the board members. We had a couple other people that had been CFOs. They were huge help to us. One that was a CIO, and I think these are the most valuable board members. If you can have somebody on your board that fits your target persona of who you sell to, now you've got somebody that you say, what do you think of this? How would you do this? How would you react to that? And so this CIO, I'd come up with something and he'd go, I'd never do that. I'd never buy anything that says that. And I was like, okay.
Okay. That makes sense. I think that's a great advice. And finding also somebody that you can sell to, but also somebody that has a lot of contacts, obviously, in that space. I think that's a huge piece of being an advisor, is making those introductions.
Agree. Yep.
What's next for you, Joe? Like, what's on the horizon for you?
I think in the last couple of years, I've pivoted or moved into this next phase for me. So I want to keep teaching, and I love UVU. I love the things that university is doing. I mean, they are really doing some cool stuff. Awesome things. I'd like to teach, in addition to marketing, I'd like to teach leadership. That's what I did my grad school work in. And there's too many people that come out of college with a degree that they have no leadership training. So they're a good accountant or a good engineer or a good marketer, and they're 2 years into their career, and somebody taps them on the shoulder and says, hey, do you want to be a manager? That's exactly right. And their question is, does it pay more? And they say, yeah, it pays more. And they're like, yeah. And so then they experiment on these 4 people on their team,
and they realize
they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, they realize they have no idea how to actually work with people.
Yeah. So teaching those leadership skills at a university level, I think would be really fun and exciting. And then I'm going to stay. Right now, I mentor a CMO. I'm an advisor for 2 or 3 other companies, help them with messaging and positioning. And the biggest reason is I think if I withdraw from all of those things, I won't be as good of an adjunct professor. Because I won't be able to go, here's what happened last week. So my plan is kind of more of the same for the next several years.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's what I personally envision for my future, like ever since attending school and being out of school. And I've been asked to go back and speak in those same classes. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I eventually, when I have the time, I'm pretty still young in my career. When I have the time, I do want to go back and teach because it's awesome. It's fun.
There's a lot of conversation about money. Is money a good thing or a bad thing? And does money buy happiness?
All
the
long
things. Forever debate. I think money buys flexibility.
Yes.
So having a career where you can make enough money to where you can then say, now what do I want to do? How do I want to contribute and be in that position? I think is a good thing, fun thing.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm excited for you and what you're doing next.
Thanks.
Are there any, to maybe wrap up, things that you recommend for executives to start doing today, whether it be maybe a book or advice that you strategically give often to make a difference in their organization or their marketing or what they're doing right now?
Book-wise, so I'm a huge Clayton Christensen fan.
Yeah.
Feel bad that we don't get any new work from
it's a
him.
Bummer. Ministry of Business is fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm also a big Patrick Lencioni fan. So he wrote The Advantage, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, The Ideal Team Player. He talks a lot about culture, and he's just a good human being. He's a really good guy. So that's where I'd suggest reading. I have a little bit of a pet peeve with business books, though, because they usually make a really good point, but you could kind of make it in 6 pages.
Half the time? Yes.
6 pages, not half the time, 6 pages. But then nobody pays $24.95 for a 6-page book.
Yeah.
So then they just regurgitate the things over and over again. So I read a lot more articles than I read business books. I mean, I try and devour a lot of articles. Harvard Business Review, I think, does a really nice job. But I think the thing about executives, or the biggest thing that I would share, is I think an executive's role as a leader is more important than an executive's role as a fill in the blank, a marketer, a head of finance, head of product. I think that the biggest impact that you can have is you have however many people on your team, go help them have a great experience, build a culture where they feel okay about failing, where they want to experiment, where they love their job, that's where you'll have that impact. Like I look at, frankly, my marketing skills. There's a lot of people that are better marketers than I am. They really are. But I think of how much time I invested in trying to take the time to mentor people, to, again, create a culture. Never perfect. Some people watch this podcast and go, well, you didn't do very well on that. But to help them have a great experience. I think that leadership piece should be priority one. And then whatever your discipline is priority two.
Well, I think that's an amazing piece of advice. And it only comes back, like, you helping your team benefits you at the end of the day and vice versa. So, and it also helps them as people, not only just as the people that work for you.
And I love seeing like people that I had as kind of entry-level marketers, and now I see that they get a CMO job.
Yeah.
That's the fun thing to see.
No, yeah, totally. I don't doubt it. That's awesome. And Joe, I really appreciate the stories and the time today. Thanks so much. Where can people interact with you and, if they want to chat?
LinkedIn's the best.
Okay.
So I spend a fair amount of time there. Yeah. And I have a website that just talks about my advisory services, and it's josephstaples.com.
Okay, sounds good.
Some guy stole Joe Staples.
I know. I hate that. You wait like 5 years and then go check.
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe, again.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. That's a wrap.
Thanks.